So Tom Sykes strikes again, and as you know, he loves to foam at the mouth about the Sussexes, and this time, I think he probably accidentally told the truth in this particular article, but I'm going to take you through what he's talking about. So essentially, Tom is saying that the eviction from Frogmore Cottage, so as you know, Harry and Meghan were evicted from Frogmore Cottage in 2023. They left in 2020, and Tom says that the eviction of the Sussexes from Frogmore Cottage was explicit punishment. He used those words, explicit punishment. He says that the king waited until after the late Queen Elizabeth died to act because the late Queen Elizabeth would have blocked it. Imagine that. He said that the late Queen Elizabeth would have blocked it. So they all know. They all know. This is why I always say there is no fair or honest press in the UK anymore. All the press, they know this. They know this as a fact, right? So the king evicted Harry and Meghan to punish them and out of spite. But we shouldn't be surprised anyway, because again, we know the king's history with his first wife, Diana. We also know that he explicitly told Harry that there's no money for Meghan. Literally, I haven't got any money to look after her. He literally told Harry that. He said, is she going to continue working as an actress?
One of the most interesting things about royal commentary is that sometimes the people who spend years criticizing Harry and Meghan end up confirming the very arguments they have been trying to dismiss. And that brings us to Tom Sykes. Because in a recent discussion about Frogmore Cottage, Tom made an admission that I don't think received nearly enough attention. In fact, I would argue that he accidentally revealed something that Harry and Meghan supporters have been saying for years. As many of you know, Harry and Meghan were effectively removed from Frogmore Cottage in 2023. They had already stepped back from royal duties and relocated to California, but Frogmore remained their UK home base. It was the one place they could return to when visiting Britain. According to Tom Sykes, however, the decision to remove them from Frogmore was not simply administrative, it was punishment. His words were explicit. Punishment. Think about that for a moment. For years, many commentators insisted that every action taken against Harry and Meghan was routine, procedural, or completely unrelated to their decision to speak publicly about their experiences. Yet here we have a royal commentator openly describing the move as punishment. Not only that, but he reportedly suggested that the late Queen Elizabeth would never have allowed it to happen during her lifetime. That is a remarkable admission. Because if the late Queen would have blocked the decision, then it raises an obvious question. Why? The answer seems fairly straightforward. The Queen understood the importance of maintaining family connections even during periods of disagreement. Whether people agreed with Harry and Meghan or not, she appeared to recognize that cutting family members off entirely was not a productive solution. Throughout her reign, Queen Elizabeth often acted as a stabilizing force within the monarchy. We saw that during the Platinum Jubilee. We saw it in the way she continued to engage with Harry and Meghan, despite the controversy surrounding the opera interview. And we saw it in the fact that Frogmore Cottage remained available to them as a UK residence. If the Queen truly would have blocked their removal, then that suggests she viewed the situation very differently from those who later decided otherwise. What is particularly interesting is that Tom's argument unintentionally supports Harry's long-standing position. Harry has repeatedly said that after he and Meghan stepped back from royal duties, various protections and support systems began disappearing. For years, critics dismissed those concerns. Yet when commentators acknowledge that major decisions were made only after the Queen passed away, they are effectively confirming that a significant shift occurred. And that shift matters, because Frogmore Cottage was never just a house. It represented a connection. It represented a physical link between Harry, Meghan, their children, and the United Kingdom. Removing that link sent a message. Whether people want to admit it or not, symbolism matters enormously within royal life. Everything is symbolic. Every title, every appearance, every residence, every invitation. So when Frogmore was taken away, many people interpreted it as a statement. Not simply about property, but about belonging. And that's why Tom's description of the move as punishment is so revealing. Because punishment implies intent. Punishment implies a response. Punishment implies cause and effect. It suggests that actions were taken because Harry and Meghan spoke out. Now, regardless of where people stand on the Sussexes, everyone should be able to acknowledge one thing. Harry and Meghan had a right to tell their story. People may disagree with parts of that story. People may challenge aspects of it. That is perfectly fair. But having a voice is not something that should be reserved only for certain members of a family. One of the recurring themes in Harry's interviews, his memoir, and Meghan's public comments has been the idea that they were expected to remain silent. Expected to absorb criticism. Expected to accept narratives about themselves without responding. And when they finally did respond, the reaction was severe. That's the pattern many supporters see. Not dialogue. Not reconciliation. Not engagement. Punishment. Which brings us back to Frogmore. Because if the goal was purely practical, then why has the property remained such a topic of discussion? Why does it continue to attract headlines? Why do commentators continue to revisit the decision? The answer is because everyone understands what it represented. It represented Harry and Meghan's place within the family. And once that place was removed, it became impossible to ignore the deeper implications. What I find most fascinating is that these admissions often come from the very people who are attempting to criticize the Sussexes. They present information as though it weakens Harry and Meghan's case. But when you examine the details closely, it frequently does the opposite. It reinforces the argument that there were consequences for speaking out. It reinforces the argument that relationships changed dramatically after certain interviews and projects. And it reinforces the argument that the late Queen may have been one of the few figures capable of keeping those relationships intact despite the tensions. At the end of the day, families are complicated. Royal families are even more complicated. But one thing remains clear. The story of Frogmore Cottage was never really about bricks and mortar. It was about what the property symbolized. A home, a connection, a bridge between two worlds. And when that bridge was removed, people noticed. Perhaps that's why discussions like this continue years later. Because every time another commentator revisits the subject, they end up revealing more about what really happened behind the scenes. And sometimes, without even realizing it, they end up confirming exactly what Harry and Meghan have been saying all along. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Frogmore Cottage was simply a property decision, or do you believe it was a symbolic response to Harry and Meghan speaking out? I'd love to hear your perspective.